And this gives us a genesis of the thought of having a national infrastructure fund twinned with the National Sovereign Wealth Fund. And not to mention, Honorable Speaker, that last year, in August of last year, this House also enacted the Government-Owned Enterprises Act that underpinned the basis on which we are now doing this National Infrastructure Fund. And I'm saying this, Honorable Speaker, because there are those who have made everyone to believe that this is an afterthought, or this is something that is being done as an afterthought without having any strategic thinking into it, Honorable Speaker. And it is these naysayers that I want to remind that this bill did not just find itself on the floor of this House. It has a basis of where it has come from. Let me also draw reference to what was said by His Excellency the President in his State of the Nation address last year. Honorable Speaker, if you allow me to quote, or rather to read part of that speech by His Excellency the President at the tail end of last year. And you remember, Honorable Speaker, the President had begun his speech by talking about 4 national priorities or national imperatives that we must, as a country, invest in, touching on energy, touching on water for irrigation, the construction of 50 mega dams and another 200 medium-sized dams to ensure that we no longer depend on rain-fed agriculture in provision of food. He also spoke about the investment, the huge investment that we need to put into the infrastructure of the expansion of our road network. And I remember him going through a whole list of projects, road projects that would be dualed. And of course, what caught my attention was the dualing of Muthaiga, Kiambu, Ndumberi Road, and of course, the investment into a new expressway from Museum Hill all the way to Thika. Not to mention the Kericho, Kisii, Migori, Sabania Road, the Mau Summit, Rironi Road, Gong, Bomas Bypass, Karen Gong Bypass, of course, which touches Honorable Ngogoyo's constituency, and I can't see him smiling broadly here because he knows how long it takes him to come from Matasia to the National Assembly. But with the huge infrastructure investment in many of these, and many others, including the SGR extension, because we left an SGR and it was christened the railway to nowhere, because it was left hanging somewhere near Suswa after Dukamoja. And the expansion, or rather the extension of that SGR all the way to Kisumu, Malaba, and to our border with our neighbors, Uganda, and of course opening us to the landlocked countries in the Great Lakes region to expand trade opportunities between our country and the East African region. And the 4 imperatives that the President spoke to, he said that we must invest in those projects, not because they are cheap, but because they're imperatives. And they're imperatives because these are what will take our nation to the next level. And in so doing, Honorable Speaker, I requested your indulgence to allow me to just read what the President said of these things. That he said, Honorable Speaker, that we cannot continue funding such essential and capital-heavy infrastructure from our own budget because it will necessitate that we continue either to borrow or to overburden taxpayers with additional taxation. And he said we cannot continue funding essential infrastructure through unsustainable borrowing or overburdening taxpayers with additional taxes. But neither can we afford to postpone these imperatives without risking our future. We therefore can't afford to postpone these imperatives. And I have heard some naysayers saying, oh, it is possible to build all these things without borrowing. It is possible to do it from our revenues. Honorable Speaker, the same naysayers who will also tell us that we have so much resources that we raise and so much that we are spending in repaying our debt and repaying our other obligations under the Consolidated Fund Services. And the President went on to say that there is a need to be innovative in the use of national revenues at our disposal. The revenues that we raise, we must be innovative in how we utilize them. but also in the deployment of national assets available to us and in creating public-private partnerships that will crowd in the enormous pool of private sector resources available regionally and globally. That is part of the objective of this bill, that you'll be able to crowd in the huge and immense resources that we have in the private sector, globally and regionally, to be able to raise more capital to invest in these capital-intensive projects. Honorable Speaker, the President went on to say that this is why we will establish the National Infrastructure Fund, whose architecture will be underpinned by the reforms in the Government-Owned Enterprises Bill, which was passed by this House in August last year, and he indicated at that time that he would be signing that law the following day, and which I can confirm the President did assent to the Government-Owned Enterprises Bill, which is now an act of Parliament. And that is what is underpinning this National Infrastructure Fund. And he went on to say that this fund is a strategic solution that will provide a framework to innovatively scale up our resources to match our ambition. It will fulfill our manifesto commitment to rebuild Kenya's infrastructure while reducing reliance on debt. We will do this by using budgeted resources prudently and introducing a financing architecture that leverages capital markets, diversifies ownership through unlocking of national assets through privatization, and uses the public-private partnership frameworks to channel private capital into public priorities. Honorable Speaker, for decades, and I remember the President alluding to that also, Kenya has privatized major public assets. This is not the first time that we are privatizing public assets. You remember we privatized KPLC, we privatized Kengen, we privatized Safaricom, and the call then was for us as members of Parliament and as legislators and policymakers to ask ourselves, what national asset exists today that we can show out of the privatization proceeds when we sold Safaricom, when we sold Kengen, when we sold KQ, or even KPLC. And we can't show anything, Honorable Speaker, because many of these privatization proceeds have always gone into financing our budget, and that